Welcome to the full moon forecast in Taurus 2024. And my colleague and fellow astrologer, Justin Crockett, is here to assist. How you doing, Justin?
Doing okay, Liz. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. So we're going to talk about the full moon.
Yes.
So to get a hold of Justin, his website is justincrockettLZ.com. And my website is alightpath.com. And we enjoy hearing from everybody. So the Taurus full moon is also called the full Beaver Moon. It's on November 15th at 1:28 p.m. Pacific. That should be standard time. And 4:28 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the moon's at 24 degrees Taurus in 0 minutes. And the sun's at 24 degrees in 0 minutes of Scorpio. So this is a fixed Earth sign, and it's ruled by Venus. And full moons are a culmination time and preparing to move forward. And Scorpio sun is about rebirth. Would you like to say anything more about that, Justin?
No, I think you got that covered.
Okay, and I'll let you take over the Nakshatras.
Yeah, so then for those who may be watching the show for the first time, Nakshatras are the Lunar Mansions. This is the breakdown of the constellation that the moon and the sun also in this case is moving through. And Nakshatras give us a deeper insight into the themes and the deities associated with those degrees that these planets are moving through. So for our particular full moon, the sun is in the lunar mansion of Visakha, and it's in the third pada or third section, and it's next to this section in the third pada. It's called the Star of Purpose, and this nakshatra or lunar mansion is ruled by a combination of Indra, which is king of the gods, and Agni, who's the god of fire. So it's a dimorphic pairing of these two gods. So it's quite dynamic. The symbol for this is the triumphal arch, and the basis above and below is cultivating and reaping. And so the Shakti power here is this need to achieve and manifest. Its ruling planet is Jupiter, and the keyword theme here is expression, and it's about looking at change in our relationship. So again, here it's about, I want you to be thinking a little bit about what is your purpose during the time of this full moon. What is your purpose? What are you doing, and why are you doing it at this particular time in our society? So then we go to the moon lunar mansion and Chandra, which is the moon in Sanskrit. And so the Nakshatra lunar mansion here, the moon is in Krittika in the first pada. And this is called the Star of Fire. So again, we see the same Agni in this one as well, the god of fire. And this is the symbol here is a knife blade or a cutting or sharp instrument, because it's the Shakti power here is the power to burn, purify, or to sever ties. And it's very exploratory. It's like, okay, I'm out of here. Done. That's kind of the energy of this. The ruling planet is the sun. It's ruled by Agni of fire. And the basis above and below here is to create heat and create light. And so one interesting thing about this, how this can play out in our lives, and I know I was talking to you this before the show there, Liz, is that this lunar mansion is prominent in Planetary's chart. I think if I remember rightly, I believe it's his Mars, which is in this. So again, we could see how this energy plays out in his life, how he kind of burned some bridges and purified and severed ties. So if you kind of think about that seminal event and sort of a prominent person and related to this nakshatra or this lunar mansion, that's kind of the energy of this. So, the sun is in this powerful, expressive, power of manifesting something, and then of, the combination of Indra and Agni, and then of course we got Agni here. So this is a big seminal full moon of change, and of course we're going to see that with the moon conjunct Uranus in the chart. So that's a little bit about the lunar mansions in this. So what is your purpose? What do you need to sever ties with? What no longer serves you? What do we need to burn or purify? And there's relationships that come into play here, values and relationships, when we look at deeper into these.
Thank you for sharing the Nakshatras. Very interesting. And then do you want to say the quote today?
Yeah, the quote is, find purpose, the means will follow. And Mahatma Gandhi said this, find purpose, the means will follow.
Thank you. So here's the chart for Seattle for the full moon. And we have the ascendant circled in orange, the midheaven circled in green, the sun in blue, and then the moon conjunct Uranus that you'd mentioned before is circled in purple. And we're going to talk about the Sabian symbols about these. So Sabian symbols were channeled in 1925 by spiritualist medium Elzie with the assistance of Mark Edmund Jones. And they're symbolic images which are made up of, a few words or a phrase of what that is. And we're going to talk about 3 of them. And so we're going to do one for leading up, one for the now, and one of what's next. So do you want to start with the Sabian symbol for the ascendant, Justin?
Sure. So the Sabian symbol we look at is what's coming, energy coming into this is Aquarius 30 degrees. So deeply rooted in the past of a very ancient culture, a spiritual brotherhood in which many individual minds are merged into the glowing light of a unanimous consciousness is revealed to one who has emerged successfully from his metamorphosis. The key note here is the ability for a person with an open mind and a deep feeling for self-transcendence to come in contact with the higher forms of existence. And so the key phrase is total consciousness of being.
Okay, and then the next one is Pisces 1. In a crowded marketplace, farmers and middlemen display a great variety of products. The keynote is the process of coming and going, interchange, which at all levels demonstrates the health of the community. And the key word is commerce.
And what we're leading to here, Pisces 2 degrees, is a squirrel hiding from hunters. The keynote here is the individual's need to both ensure his future subsistence and to protect himself from aggressive social elements. Boy, that speaks to a lot for us right now. And the key word here is self-protection.
So do you have a summation for the ascendant, or just move
Well, I
on?
would just say for us that are on the West Coast, because this is the ascendant at the West Coast. I think this kind of tells how we're kind of moving into this full moon. This is the ascendant. This is our mass of the world. This is how we're moving into that full moon.
Okay, and then next we have the midheaven at 16 Sagittarius, and leading up we have 15 Sagittarius, the groundhog looking for its shadow on Groundhog Day, February 2nd. The keynote is the value of anticipating new turns of events and ascertaining future prospects, and the keyword is perspective.
And then Sagittarius 16 degrees is seagulls fly around a ship in expectation of food. The keynote here is the easily acquired dependence of psychic desires upon the stimulation of social circumstances. And here we have this symbol of dependence.
And then next is Sagittarius 17. An Easter sunrise service draws a large crowd. And the keynote is the culturally stimulated longing for group participation in a process of rebirth. And the keyword is rebirth.
So my thoughts on this are, since this is us on the West Coast, because the missed ahead event on the West Coast, I think this is showing us what what we're, the midheavens, what your higher goals are, or a spiritual way of looking at it here. So I see, we need to look at our perspective, our dependence that we might have thought we had on certain things, and, maybe a rebirth of particular groups that we're associating with, and community.
Thank you. And then we have the Sabian symbol for the sun, if you want to start that one.
Sure. So the sun at, leading into is Scorpio 23 degrees. A rabbit metamorphoses into a nature spirit. And here we have the keynote, which is Scorpio. So it's about raising one's animal desires to a higher level, is transubstantiation. I can never say that word correctly. Transubstantiation. Basically, it's about change.
That's a tongue twister.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is Scorpio 24. After having heard an inspired individual deliver his Sermon on the Mount, crowds are returning home. The keynote is the need to incorporate inspiring experiences and teachings into everyday living. And the key phrase is challenge to transform.
Second one talking about transformation there. And then Scorpio 25 degrees, what we're moving towards is an X-ray photograph. Keynote here is the capacity to acquire knowledge of the structural factors in all existence. And the key phrase is structural knowledge in contrast to existential knowledge.
Yeah, having two Sabian symbols in different areas talking about transformation, that's very interesting. And I think that there's going to be a lot of transformation taking place.
Right. And that goes back to the Lunar Mansions. We were talking about that transformation of purging and severing ties.
Okay, and then we're going to go to the moon, and we're going to start with Taurus 23, a jewelry shop filled with valuable gems. The keynote is the social confirmation of natural excellence. And the key phrase is certification of personal worth.
And then Taurus 24 degrees, an Indian warrior riding fiercely, human scalps hanging from his belt. And the keynote here is the aggressiveness of human instincts when fighting for the earthly base of operation. And the key phrase is violence for survival.
And then next is Taurus 25, a vast public park. And the keynote is the cultivation of natural energies for collective use and recreation. And the key phrase is collective enjoyment, the feeling of belonging. And I feel like it's, time that we find our groups or our people that, can be of like mind or that we feel supported with.
Right, because what we've belonged to so far may not feel like it's towards the best, towards our greatest, highest good for survival.
And it changes from time to time too, so it could be a time to readjust all that.
Yeah, regroup. Yeah, absolutely.
And we have a few planets out of bounds around this time, and out of bounds is when a planet's declination exceeds 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south. And the planets are out of the bounds of the sun and they act on their own. So it could be like a 2-year-old acting out. So the moon will be out of bounds November 17th through the 20th. Mercury is out of bounds November 7th through the 30th. Venus is out of bounds from October 27th through December 3rd. And Ceres has been out of bounds since April 2nd and will stay out of bounds until January 15th of next year.
Awesome. Hey, can we go back a slide? Sorry. That last slide, we were on the last one there. Yeah, the Taurus. Okay, the moon. Yes, okay. All right, I'm good. I just wanted to get a sense of where we were at on that one. Thanks.
Okay, and here's an aspect grid that might be handy for some of you. And here again, we have the Taurus full moon at 24 degrees Taurus and 0 minutes on November 15th. And the moon is conjunct Uranus. And we were talking earlier, and we kind of feel that that's a big standout for this full moon, it's intensifies that moon. What would you say about that Uranus conjunct the moon?
Well, I think it's got several themes, as you know. I think it's not only one is it's about the because Uranus represents rebellion, revolution, or change, and it's right next to the moon, so this means a lot of emotional upheaval, right? But in the fact that the moon is in Taurus, which when a moon is in Taurus, it's about safety, security, your Maslow hierarchy needs. Back to those Sabian symbols, the survival for, yourself and your nurturing from others. That Taurus, I think that's going through a wrecking ball right now, and I think this really brings in a lot. And I think when we see some other aspects later on, it shows how that may play out, those emotions that are being churned by Uranus. What do you think?
Yes, and it kind of follows along with, and I know I've mentioned this in other shows, of what do I need? Does this sustain me? Do I really want this? I've been helping my mom clean out stuff that some of it she's had for most of her life, and she's in her 80s now, and um, we get to a certain few boxes, and she just can't part with it, and so we have to put that aside, but then we go on to something else. So it's like trying to decide what you want to keep and move on with.
Right.
And so it's changing for everybody. And I would think with this full moon that, there's going to be some big changes if you haven't started making some changes or been thinking about it. It might be like, oh, I really have to think about this, or, I need to
Right.
act on it.
Right. Right.
It's time to make that shift.
Exactly.
And then here we have the chart with other um, aspects. So we have a Thor's hammer, and that's when you have 2 points that are sesquiquadrate, 135 degrees from one point to the other, and then a square with that. So we have that that Thor's hammer pointing to the moon in Uranus. And so, there's big changes coming because Thor's hammers, you feel them, they can be intense, but there's change coming, and you probably really can't stop it or anything. And the one point comes from Venus and Pholus, and the other point comes from the South Node in Vesta. So,
So what jumps out to me with that, Liz, is that the moon Uranus being quincunx the Venus and Pholus to me, so that's the imbalance. And I think this shows again. I think there's sort of this illumination happening within the collective, and so there's an imbalance between our emotions and our desires here. And I think Pholus next to Venus brings change of structure of our desires. So this is going to be a time when people have a reevaluation, of what we thought or desired with Venus and Capricorn, and it's affecting our emotions and change there.
and on the slide, I have it as a quincunx, but it's a sesquiquadrate. Sorry about that. Um, but that's okay because a sesquiquadrate is 135. So, but then, um, anyway, anything else you want to say about Thor's hammer?
No.
Okay, so we have a fixed grand cross here, and the sun and moon are opposite each other, and then Pluto, Pluto's out of sign for being a fixed sign, but it's getting really close to going into Aquarius, and it's opposite Mars, and Mars will be opposite Pluto. We're going to have two more exact when the minutes and seconds are exact. So this grand cross is kind of in effect, or this opposition with Pluto and Mars is in effect for into early next year, actually. So that can add to some tension for people. What would you say about the fixed grand cross?
Yeah, I think the big thing that jumps out to me here is is that Mars-Pluto opposition, which is actually going to be with us into the next year. This is a long, because Mars is going to go retrograde soon, and then it won't go direct until after into the new year. So we're dealing with a long-term, for at least 2 or 3 months here, a Mars-Pluto opposition, which is quite long for that. And that really is kind of changing the structure of our direction of for a lot of people.
Exactly.
That's what really jumps out to me with that Grand Cross. I think it's the biggest thing to pay attention to.
And then next we have a quincunx or an inconjunct, and that's from this Moon and Uranus to Pallas Athena. So, and Pallas is about strategy. So, I always think of it as informing the change. So it's like with the change, I would say to be smart of how you work and move with the change. Don't react too fast or too quickly.
Right.
Think about it.
I'm sorry to move on, but can I go back to that Pluto Mars opposition, because it's something that's interesting. When the 2016 election happened, Mars was at 29 degrees Capricorn, where Pluto is now. So it's interesting that the next election, that the Mars is opposing that. So it's actually interesting as sort of, you can kind of almost think also there's something about this energy that's also Mars opposing Mars a little bit in that whole scenario there. To the quincunx of the Moon Uranus in conjunct Pallas, I think it's to me it's just again informing us about patterns during this period of time.
And then I added in the squares in quincunxes. Yeah, I think, no, those are sesquiquadrates. That should be and it kind of forms a cradle, so that's why I added that in. So we have Mars square Juno, Jupiter square Saturn and Nessus, Mars sesquiquadrate to Saturn and Nessus, and Jupiter sesquiquadrate to Juno.
So can I say something about the sesquiquadrates? That, that's sort of also an imbalance and some structure issues with limitations. So, back to the Moon sesquiquadrate of Venus, I think there's this limitations about our desires of structure and our emotions about it. So there's definitely is time to make sure that we don't have limiting emotions about what changes are happening. And I think what do we say, the Jupiter sesquiquadrate with Juno is really, I think, more about communications with our relationships and some limitations there with that. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think that there's an emphasis on that Juno because Mars is square and Jupiter is sesquiquadrate to it. So it is about relationships. So it's like I would say, don't jump too fast. Make sure you have the facts or all the information before you make choices and decisions. But relationships
For you burn,
certainly
purify.
right. They could be burned and purified.
Sever ties.
And then, Mars and Saturn. So it's like interesting that combination. And I call it a cradle of those planets because they're, communicating with each other. And, make sure that the communication that you understand somebody correctly because sometimes it's easy to misunderstand somebody. So do you have anything else you'd like to say about this chart?
No.
And then we have here a mini grand trine between Pluto is trine the Moon and Uranus, and they are sextile to Neptune. So, and this aspect has been in aspect for a couple months and will continue for a little while longer. with Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, the outer planets. So even though we were just talking about all the change, but it's like, to me, those outer planets are kind of staying in communication, and they are generational things, but it's like there's a lot of change, but then there isn't a lot of change. What would you like to say about the mini
Well,
grand trine?
anytime Uranus and Pluto aspect, expect change, right? So that's a given. That's a given. So.
And then we have a few trines here. We have Pluto trine the south node, Mars trine the north node, and Sun trine Neptune. So there's a lot going on there. And then with the Mars trine the north node, it's also sextile the south node. And so it kind of makes a loop and connects some of the other planets in that Pluto trine the south node. And like we talked about earlier, that Roe versus Wade is gone and it'll never come back. So it's kind of like releasing some of that stuff that was, and now we have to form new things. So do you have anything else to say?
No, that's it.
And then Jupiter's in a sextile with Chiron. So any of the healing energy or our wounds, it's like our wounds could be bigger, or they might need more work, or the work that we are doing for our wounds, whatever they may be, a little step could be a giant success.
Or, and here's the other darker aspect of this, that communications could be reopening wounds here. Because with Chiron there, it can create trauma. So it's the healer, but there's also a trauma thing that can be happening at the same time. So it's important to look at Chiron. I think that this is where we could be experiencing trauma at this particular time, and how Jupiter can play into that trauma in Gemini and communications. So it's really kind of important what we're hearing and what communications and information we're letting in, and that it's not triggering Chiron to create trauma for us.
Right, because I have a couple of friends that have PTSD, and they've been re-triggered lately for different situations, and it's like they're working on, calming that down as much as they can of what's possible. So yes, it can, be pouring salt in, but then it's like you need to take a step back sometimes too. So
right.
So do you have a takeaway for the full moon?
Well, I think this full moon is just sort of indicative of what's going on in the collective. And I think back to what the Lunar Mansions are showing, that this is a period of change and a very seminal event. And it's time to regroup, to nurture ourselves, and to find purpose in periods of chaos, find purpose. And I think that's kind of back to the Nakshatras. I was just talking about that. And it's kind of, what is your purpose now? Focus on the longer term, why you're here on this planet. And you may have to rearrange or make changes to plans based on what's happening in society, but keep your eyes on the prize.
That's great advice. Keep breathing. Do
Yep.
good self-care. So I'm going to talk about the lunar phase family or gestational cycle. There's 4 phases: the new, the first quarter, full, and last quarter. And it goes from 9 months to 9 months to 9 months to 9 months from new to first quarter full phase. So it's a 3-year cycle. And the lunar phase family that we're currently in, we're at the full moon phase of it, but the new phase started back in May 19th of 2023 at 28 degrees Taurus. Then the first quarter phase was February 16th of 2024 at 27 degrees Taurus. And now we're at the full moon phase on November 15th at 24 Taurus. And then the third quarter phase will be August 15th. So if you journal or keep good notes, you can refer back to May of 2023. You may have started a project, started something new, and you can see how it's going. And at the full moon, lots of times it's like, do I want to continue on with this? Is it time to let it go? Is it time to put it on the back burner for a later time? So it's like a review process.
I want to say how important that whole thing is that you just talked about. I think that's so important. Lunar
Right.
phase family.
They are, because it's like a longer cycle, because we do from new moon to full moon, and that's a short cycle of
Right.
about a month of 29 days. And so you can start something on the new moon, and then full moon, it's like time to that's our releasing time. And then I also look at the yearly lunar phase. So the Taurus new moon was on May 7th of this year at 18 degrees Taurus, and the full moon is November 15th again at 24 degrees Taurus. So even this year in May, like, did you start something, initiate something, start projects, develop a new product for your company? So it's like kind of fun to look at these phases, because sometimes in a month you can't accomplish everything, and even 1 year. So I like to look at the 3-year cycle, because it's a more complete, because some projects just take longer.
Right.
So I want to thank everybody that's watching live today, and those that come back and watch when it's posted on my channel. Justin and I both have newsletters and YouTube channels. We both do consultations. So if you want to get a hold of us for an astrological consultation, my website, or you can email me, liz@alightpath.com, and Justin, you can email him at justin.elzie@gmail.com. And Justin and I do about 3 podcasts a month. And then I have a series with the Astrology Star Sisters, and we do various topics. We have a dwarf planet series, a planet stationing, the decans using astrology and tarot, and fixed stars. And then Justin and I are both on Talk Cosmos, and we do the new moon. We're the archetypal symbols team, and we'll be talking about the new moon on December 1st at 1 p.m. If you want to join my channel or Justin's channel, you can watch it live. And Justin, would you like to talk about your stuff, please?
Yeah, I do some stuff on Instagram and another podcast with Michael Bartlett, the relationship guy. So just check us out there, and you'll see. We talk a little bit about relationships, and we've got some new episodes coming.
Yeah, and they've been really good. So I suggest that you watch those if you're interested in relationship astrology. And then Justin's going to be speaking at OPA on December 8th, and he's going to be talking about the Sabian symbols. Do you want to say anything about that, Justin?
Yeah, basically going to be introducing them to people who may not know anything about them, and how we can use the Sabian symbols to go deeper into our consultations with clients, and how they're a key tool to giving us deeper insight.
Thank you. So again, to get a hold of Justin, his website's justincrockettLZ.com, and my website is alightpath.com. So is there anything else you want to say before we end today?
No, that's it.
Well, thanks everybody for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So goodbye for now, and we'll see you soon.